Thank you for tuning in to No Flag Radio. I'm your host, P. In the game. Today we talking about making America cheat to win again. This is inspired by that dork Richard Spencer, the white supremacist terrorist, talking about we don't value fairness, we value winning. So if anybody comes at you talking that we value winning and they're overly vocal about white winnings, make sure you either beat them over the head with this concept or just say this in your own mind meditatively. First, ask the question, why don't y'all care that cheating is bad, that cheating is wrong? If you say it to somebody that's a white supremacist terrorist, they'll probably answer you because good guys always lose. The nice guy always loses. The nicest loses. Because they've created a culture here in America that constantly swirls this toilet bowl of being ill to people, doing evil to people, because the dominant culture here is white supremacist terrorists, low melanin, low cerebral spinal fluid, creates an aggressive, senselessly depressed being, and they've been allowed to bleed over into the activity of politics, social behavior and interaction, and economy. That's where that mentality comes from, that the bad guy is gonna be the winner. This backwards mentality, right? This is what we're dealing with. So when we're dealing with a group of people that values winning over harmony, they don't want civility with people who've been on the earth and will be on the earth longer than them, you get somebody like the Madden shooter, David Katz, because that's exactly what he was, an idiot who only valued winning on some racist white supremacist terrorist Richard Spencer type of psychology, if you didn't make the connect. Except it's multiplied, and as I mentioned, it affects community structures as a mind state. And as I break down other hate groups and other white supremacist terrorist gangs, you'll see this same mentality pop up. This win at all costs, don't be civil with anyone, the nice guy always loses type of mentality, because that's their culture. Senseless aggression, winning at all costs, is based in a desperation that is very unique to white supremacist terrorist history. You'll even catch them trying to throw in survivalism in times of non-desperation, specifically for their group, for their race, times where things aren't really desperate for white people. In terms of all their social things they put in place, economically, socially, politically, there's nothing that weighs on them that causes them any sort of duress. And it's obvious. The truth is, white supremacist terrorists are too coward to deal with any manner of desperation or their own weaknesses, if you want to get down to it. And they've always used white supremacist terrorist media to blame other people for their problems. They want to label all of their own weaknesses as some problem that some other group is generating for them, if you notice that. And they do it with all non-white groups. But of course, on my channel, we only care about black people, period, all day, every day. Get out of my face if you're talking about anybody else's business. Warrior-minded, heterosexual black people. Just check who follow me on Twitter, right? That's all I fuck with. And when other groups try to follow me, I just simply go to their page, I read their shit, and if the pro-black is lacking or the heterosexuality ain't there, I'll block them. It's just my personal routine, right? But talking about this cheat to win desperation that the white supremacist terrorist suffers from internationally. And as I mentioned, they try to mask this cheat to win desperation as survival in times of non-desperation for white people. That's when it looks the most obvious, right? Like we see today. And we can give examples. They genetically and physically are so frail, they can't do simple things like work farmland without dying or getting sick. This is their history. Well, the solution to that is to pawn it off on black people in the form of slavery and wealth calcification for hundreds of years in America. I'm gonna stop calling it plantation slavery. We should call it white supremacist terrorist wealth calcification, because that's all that it was and all that it is. And they just pawned off the work that was being done on black people in the form of slavery across various diaspora. So it's not just in America that they were weak and couldn't stand up to natural life and physical labor. We see today they pawn it off on black prison labor and Latino farm labor. They're still the same weak-bodied group, right? But again, they'll mask that fact, pulling this revisionist historian move like, you were born to be slaves, you were only slaves, trying to sell that to make themselves feel like they are doing something right. But again, they're ignoring that any instance where enslaved black people existed, it existed because a group of people did not deal in righteousness with them. They did not deal in civility. They did not deal in high IQ-ness with their making of a civilization. Slaves had to be made. It's not called slave genetics. It's called slave making. It's a process. Black people, we had to deal with our people being tricked. Our people got sold out into slavery. All these were manufactured states of domination. And like I said, if you got a manufacturing underclass, or any group that has to create duress, pain, strain for another group of people in order for them to sit in dominance, they're not a dominant group. They're having to stack all odds against one group of people and then say they're great. Like, no, that's not how greatness is achieved. This is the crap that they've been doing. They'll go into a land, they'll lie to the indigenous people of a land. That's a tactic. They'll come in, ask, hey, can I just build one missionary, one single church? And then sooner or later, that church turns into a trade post for goods that they bring. And then they bring in the military and the warriors that they claim to need to protect the goods and the commerce. And then that graduates to an occupation of the land, right? Taking a few women and children here and there, kidnapping people, all this shit. Let's kidnap some engineers, let's kidnap some architects, let's kidnap some mathematicians for slavery that graduated into kidnapping, exporting, importing an entire race for slave labor. We became the face of slavery and white hoarded calcifiable wealth through it. So our being controlled by other groups had to be machined. You understand? It's not organic. Like I said, it's called slave making, not slave genetics. Destruction-minded groups advancing upon black living with intent to do harm and then hiding behind some prop standard of winning. I could give you more examples for them masking their own physical and mental desperation. Look at the opioid deaths raining down on that ass, all right? Mexicans, Afghans, Chinese selling opioids to white people in the US and in Europe. They dare not call out an unguarded, unchecked pharmaceutical industry, a billion-dollar industry allowed to promote drugs and opioids by doctors with a lax dispensary database system. They dare not use the easiest way to end their own damn crisis. Just say no, you motherfuckers. You remember that shit? You pure angelic white supremacist terrorist people all over the world. Y'all looking real degenerate with y'all drugs. And y'all dying. And y'all dare not mention. Y'all dare not mention that shit. You know what I mean? You got the high IQ. Well, what's the damn problem? I'll tell you what the problem is. Y'all gonna blame somebody else. That's what the problem is. Y'all gonna blame somebody else for y'all being dope heads on every continent that y'all are a majority on. Y'all not gonna blame your low cerebral spinal fluid that's unique to Caucasians in particular. That leads to addictions, aggression, and other shit. And your high IQ scientists and your CDC, they ain't gonna tell you that. You know what I mean? They're just gonna run their little news cycle about it. Do some fear mongering about white opioid death rate crisis and then blah, 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 onto some bullshit about treatment centers, totally ignoring the dope buying habits internationally of your typical workaday white supremacist terrorist, race soldier, white supremacist, etc. Right? They got y'all looking real stupid out here. What else? They try to mask their low birth rates as other people's problems and then try to sell winning. We're just winning because we don't have babies before we have the money. You already know that's some bullshit. They got bread. They can't make babies. But what do? They project that, the fact that they got money and still can't have babies, they project that shit on the high birth rates of anybody else who not a white supremacist terrorist, and even make the excuse that other people should abort babies, policing people around said issue because they can't win at that issue. Like they tried with black babies, but black babies ain't going no damn where. Latino babies ain't going no damn where but up. Asians, their go-to savior right now, they trying to fuck with Asians hard to try to get their replacement levels up, but Asians are also below replacement levels with their birth rate. You didn't know that. If you didn't know that, check out my boy Keith Newsom. He's spitting that. And that's something to look at a little later when I talk about Africa dealing with day-to-day Chinese presence in Africa's economic hotspots, right? But they'll blame everybody. They'll blame immigration laws, but they just can't bring themselves to blame the uterus of the white woman publicly like we do. Always blaming somebody else. You see how they operate? All right, so that's what white supremacist terrorists do as a whole. They have already limited perception skills due to no melanin, limited thought power due to no melanin. They feed it all through this short-sighted prism of how they engage with the non-racist white supremacist terrorist black people around them, and they get these half-ass, half-baked, half-cooked results with everything they touch. So I just had to drop this right fast to give some insight on this cheat to win desperation for white supremacist terrorists, where it's rooted at, and how the pattern of it always finds itself ending in them blaming somebody else for something that is their problem. Let me get it, y'all.